We are here one more time with Professor Melo Cerqueira, and Gustavo Melo Cerqueira is a doctor in African and African Diaspora Studies from the University of Texas, and a master's also from the University of Texas in ads, graduated in law from the Federal University of Bahia, and it's also a babalorixá, and an actor and a performer. Babalorixá is a priestess of the Afro-Brazilian religion. He worked with Cia Teatro dos Novos and Bando de Teatro Olodum in Salvador, and with Candaces-a dos Comuns in Rio de Janeiro. He develops research related to the Black body in the performing arts and presence from the intersection of theories and methods of Black studies, performance studies, sociology, and theater. He is currently one of the PRETOs one of the coordinators of the PELE NEGRA ESCOLA de Teatros Pretos. In 2020, he was approved in first place in the contest for a postdoctoral scholarship in the graduate program in performing arts at the Federal University of Bahia. Unfortunately, the Brazilian government suspended registration of new scholarships holders, which has prevented Gustavo from starting this postdoctoral research. Please help me welcome Dr. Gustavo Melo Cerqueira. And Doctor, the stage is yours.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Daniela Gomes. Daniela, who's the dearest friend I have. I used to say that she's one of the sisters that UT Austin gave to me, right? So I think that we created a very interesting family that we keep carrying on. And it's been amazing to have your partnership. So thank you, Crystal, also for being here with us and giving all the support. And all of you who are there and have the opportunity to talk to us, thank you so much. I think that with so many online events and seminars and lectures and everything, it's so exhausting to do everything online. And when I see that some of you really take your time to be here and participate in this, it's really, really something that I value a lot. So thank you. All right, so today I'm gonna start sharing the screen with you all with the presentation that I created for today. And here we go. I think that now you can see. So some of you could be here with me a few weeks ago when we were talking about candomblé, Afro-Brazilian religions, and religious races in Brazil. So one of the things that I was also supposed to be talking to you was about the artistic performance, right? So I said, well, what I'm gonna talk to them about the artistic performances. So I decided to do something very specific, which is to talk about Teatro Negro in Brazil. And I'm going to be talking about a particular Teatro Negro group whose name is Cia dos Comuns, a group I worked with for a few years in Brazil, okay? As you all must have noticed, I'm not saying the trajectory of Black theater group Cia dos Comuns, I'm saying Teatro Negro group Cia dos Comuns. And this is just to tell you that I want to prevent people from thinking of Teatro Negro in Brazil as something that is a consequence of Black theater from the US or from different parts of the world. So I'm talking a very specific way of doing Black theater in Brazil. And to kind of preserve such specificity, I also prefer to keep it in Portuguese. That's why I use the term Teatro Negro. All right. But for some of you that need the translation, it is the same as Black theater, or in the case of the United States, you use, say, African American theater. So in our case, we use this word Teatro Negro. Some people use also Teatro Preto, which would be kind of a synonym with maybe some political dimensions in difference. But anyways, let's keep going. So I'm going to be talking to you about this trajectory, kind of a little bit of the history and some of the characteristics of this Teatro Negro group named Cia dos Comuns, okay? So first thing I need to tell you is that Cia dos Comuns was founded in Rio de Janeiro. Rio de Janeiro is a very famous city here in Brazil. So this group was founded in 2001 by a Black actor, director, and cultural producer named Hilton Cobra. And it became one of the most prominent and influential Teatro Negro groups in Brazil in the first decade of the 21st century. So between 2001 and 2010, 2012, let's say, Cia dos Comuns was no doubt the main Teatro Negro group we had in Brazil at that point. And we have lots of Teatro Negro groups. We're going to be talking a little bit about this. I'm telling you the history of this particular group because it became really prominent and influential. So the poetics of the group kind of influenced the poetics of other Teatro Negro groups, but this is not the only one, and this is not the only way of doing Teatro Negro in Brazil, okay? So by performing those plays, so the plays of the groups combine some of the reference to Black culture and at the same time the representation of social and political issues that Black people live in Brazil, right? Along with that, the group also develops different activities, which are called the offstage activities to implement public policy for Black performing arts. So I'm talking about this Teatro Negro group that develops kind of two branches of activities, right? So the on-stage activities and the off-stage ones. The on-stage could be the plays that the group does, and I'm going to be talking about them, and the off-stage activities, which are the activities that the group develops to implement public policies that could give more support, especially financial support, for the Black performing arts in Brazil. All right. But what is Teatro Negro? What is Black theater? What is, maybe I could say, what is African American theater in the case of you guys in USA? So this is one of the questions that we have, and there are different ways of defining Teatro Negro here in Brazil. All right, so one of the first definitions that I would like to bring to you, and I'm gonna bring only 3 of them. One of the first definitions we have is brought by Leda Maria Martins. Leda Maria Martins is a professor of literature of the Federal University of Minas Gerais. She's retired right now. She is one of the most influential Black intellectuals we have in Brazil, especially when it concerns to Black culture and more specifically to Teatro Negro. So what Leda Maria Martins says, and I'm not trying to make you understand right away what she brings, it's not really a definition, but maybe one of the main characteristics of Teatro Negro. She says that its distinctiveness and singularity as compared to other forms of theater are not necessarily tied to the color, phenotype, or ethnicity of the playwright, actor, or director as external marks, although it is grounded in that color, that phenotype, that ethnicity, besides considering the experience, the cultural and historic memory, and the social place of this subject, erecting these elements as signs that are projected and articulated in the discourse that represent them and make them represent themselves both symbolically and figuratively. I know it's a lot of words, so sometimes it's kind of difficult to understand. So it would be necessary to break down this definition a little bit so that we can have a better understanding. We could spend months studying this, only this paragraph. So we're not gonna be breaking down everything. But the thing I wanted to call attention to you is that what she says is that although we're talking about Teatro Negro, and although the color, the phenotype, and the ethnicity of the playwright, actor, and director are really important, they are not important as external marks, but they are more important in the ways in which these color, phenotype, ethnicity, and a few other elements, they become signs. So she brings a lot of semiotics in this discussion and definition of Teatro Negro. So how these elements, they become signs that are articulated in the discourses that are produced about us and the discourse we produce about ourselves. So the distinctiveness or the singularity or the specificity of Teatro Negro, according to Martins, resides in the ways in which we deal with those elements that I was mentioning to you, in the ways in which we deal with those elements in the production of discourses. The ways we read the discourses that are produced about us, and the ways in which we transform those discourses and produce our own discourse, in the case that she's saying here, about ourselves. All right? So this is one of the characteristics that Leda Maria Martins brings about Teatro Negro that I want to point out to you all. There is another intellectual, and this one comes from France. She's not Black, and she's an anthropologist. And she spent many years here in Brazil doing a lot of research about Teatro Negro. That was her main research for her PhD, and she did most of her research here in Brazil. And she brings this definition here, which is actually based on a series of interviews that she did. And she published an essay, which is a really good essay about this. But again, in a very anthropological sense, which is good for us, because every time we talk about Black performance in Brazil, because of all the social and political contents, we're talking about an interdisciplinary field. We're not speaking only about arts. We're speaking about politics, we're speaking about culture, we're speaking about society. So these different approach to Black theater, they are really, really important. So Duchamp says that Teatro Negro can be understood as a theater that discusses in its dramaturgy the situation of Blacks, as it can also be understood only according to the presence of the Black actor in the scene, or still by the mere fact that the director is Black. Well, depending on the idea that is adopted, different forms of practicing Teatro Negro may arise. Some accentuate the aspects of the activist discourse. Others value the presence of the Black body in the scene, the importance of religiosity, and of cultural artistic expressions. In this essay, she brings different views of Teatro Negro that comes from different experiences and different ways of practicing Teatro Negro. And she kind of synthesizes this a little bit in this short paragraph. But if you read the full essay, it's amazing as you see how each Black artist sees his or her work in a different way and tries to emphasize different elements. And that's what makes Teatro Negro so plural and so diverse as well. Then there is this third definition that I also think it's really important, and it is brought by Evani Tavares Lima. Evani is an actress and director, and she is graduated in theater. She did her master's and her PhD as well in theater. And Evani Tavares Lima is going to propose kind of a categorization of Teatro Negro in order to define what is the kind of Teatro Negro that she is interested in researching. So she proposes that we could divide Teatro Negro in three main categories. One of the categories is performance negra, which can be translated as Black performance. The other one is the Teatro de Presença Negra, which can be translated as Theater of Black Presence. And the other one is the Teatro Engajado Negro, which we could say Black engaged theater. So performance negra would be kind of all activities we do every day, and they do not necessarily need an audience as we have in conventional theater. That's how she defines it. Teatro de Presença Negra, or the theater of Black presence, is kind of any kind of theater that can have a Black actor on the scene, on stage. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's Teatro Negro, or at least that's not the Teatro Negro that she's interested in researching, but that's what she'd call the Teatro de Presença Negra. You have Black actors on stage, but is that enough to really characterize a form or a political form of Teatro Negro, which is what she really wants to deal with and to research. And so she brings the Teatro Engajado Negro, which is the Black engaged theater. And she says that in this engaged theater, the main purpose is attached to the discussion of issues related to the situation of Blacks in society and the defense and affirmation of their identity and culture. This theatrical stream presents an explicitly critical positioning, either in the text or in its formal aspects, or both, in relation to the situation of the Black individual or the Black subject and his/her culture in society, using theater as a tool of contestation. In this theater, society plays an expressive role. It is from, in favor of, and or in opposition to society that this theater is realized. So I'm not the kind of guy who really likes this kind of categorization when I make some of the definitions. I don't like many definitions, but in the case of Cia dos Comuns, this definition of Teatro Engajado Negro, which is proposed by Lima, that's the one that suits better. This is the kind of theater that the group that I'm talking to you today used to do, and these are the main characteristics that I want you to pay attention to. So I bring here the ways in which I kind of see the kind of theater that Cia dos Comuns does, and this is in Portuguese right here, but I'm going to send you the translation of this as well. One of the things that I do here when I talk about the Teatro Negro that is made by Cia dos Comuns is that I want to call you all attention that Evani Tavares Lima uses, I use the term Teatro Negro Engajado, and it's a little bit different from the term that is used by Evani Tavares Lima, which is Teatro Engajado Negro. So in a sense, when Evani Tavares Lima makes her categorization, I would say, and that's kind of a critique that I have, is that she defines Teatro Engajado Negro as a form of engaged theater. It is as if Teatro Negro could be understood as a form of engaged theater, of a form of political theater. Yes, that's a way of seeing things, but I prefer to use Teatro Negro Engajado, which is to say engaged, not engaged Black theater, but Black engaged theater. I prefer to use this way because I prefer to understand that we have different forms of Teatro Negro, and the engaged form is one of them. All right. So I'm going to translate this and send this to you, but what I want to call attention in here in this definition that I make, that I also think that has a lot to do with what Cia dos Comuns does, is that I see a lot of Black performance, a kind of a tension between the condition of being human and the condition of being Black. Wait. Are you saying that Blacks are not humans? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about this kind of tension and kind of opposition in political terms. Because as most of you must have noticed in your lived experience, we fight every day to make our humanity to be recognized. So what I see in the kind of Teatro Negro that Cia dos Comuns does is also that there are many poetic strategies that are employed to make our humanity to be recognized by our audience. It doesn't mean we are not humans. It means that we deal with the negation, the denial of humanity in Black bodies. Okay? That's a very deep philosophical discussion that we can have later if you guys want. So Cia dos Comuns had lots of different influences when it was created in 2001 in Rio de Janeiro. And one of the main influences of Cia dos Comuns was Teatro Experimental do Negro, which was founded by Abdias do Nascimento. Abdias do Nascimento was a very, very, very important Black intellectual we have in Brazil. He was also an actor, a playwright, a director. He's right here. I think that you guys can see here. So he's right here doing Othello, a character from a William Shakespeare play. Okay, so Teatro Experimental do Negro was founded in 1944, but the first play of the group only premiered in 1945, because when they kind of trying to create the group, they also noticed that they would need to have lots of Black people who could also be able to read well and to read those plays and to really participate in the creation of the theater. So the first activity actually that Teatro Experimental do Negro has done in 1944 was a class to the alphabetization of adults, Black adults. And it took kind of 1 year so that they could have more people that could participate in the plays as well. It's a very long and very interesting story. So Teatro Experimental do Negro was very active between 1944 and 1967, 1968, which was pretty much when Abdias do Nascimento had to leave the country. At that time, we had a military dictatorship happening in Brazil in the late 60s. So Abdias do Nascimento had to leave the country. And that's pretty much the moment when we assume it was the end of Teatro Experimental do Negro. It was not the first experience in Teatro Negro in Brazil, but it's definitely the one that everybody needs to refer, even if it is to criticize the activities and the dramaturgy or the kind of theater that Teatro Experimental do Negro did. Okay? So another big influence of Cia dos Comuns was Bando de Teatro Olodum. Bando de Teatro Olodum was created in Salvador in 1991. When it was created, it was not intentionally, or at least not in the beginning, a theater group made to be only for Blacks only, but then it became a group that was dedicated to Blacks only. And it was in the beginning a very popular theater. The kind of theater they did, it was very popular theater, that kind of theater that had different reference from the streets. The dramaturgy that they created was the dramaturgy of the everyday life. The language was the language of the everyday life. It's not that kind of conventional theater language with all the plurals and everything in the right place. No, it was really the ways in which we speak in every day. So they did lots of plays in this sense, but also this is one of the groups that is one of the most influential groups as well that we have in Brazil. And it's probably the groups, this is the Teatro Negro group that has the longest, I don't know how to say that in English, but it's o mais longevo, the one that exists for a longer time. It was founded in 1991. We are now in 2021, and the group still exists. It's 30 years of existence, right? This is not common for any theater group, especially for Teatro Negro groups. But you can see here that at the same time that we had very popular plays, in the sense of doing a popular theater, in the sense of bringing the everyday life to the stage with all the political commentary and the political critique, the group also did very kind of avant-garde ways of doing theater. So this theater, for this play, for example, is named Do, and it was made based on a workshop they did with a Buto dancer. And so there is a deep influence of Buto in this play. This is an also play that is named Bença, which is, maybe we could translate that in Portuguese as something like bless me. And this play is a play to honor elderly people, to honor the people that came before us and we need to learn from. So it's a very beautiful play, and it's a very contemporary one. So we don't have characters here. So it's the relation of the performers with the drums and the relation that they have with themselves, the relation they have with these videos that are projected in different screens, including the floor. It's something completely different from what we have here and what we have here. So in the same way that I'm telling you that we have different Teatro Negro groups with different approach, also single groups of Teatro Negro have different approach, especially when they have so many years of existence, as is the case of Bando de Teatro Olodum. So when I talk about Cia dos Comuns, I told you that they have the on-stage activities and the off-stage activities. So some of the off-stage activities were very, very concerned with the implementation of public policies. The main off-stage activity concerned with public policy is exactly the Fórum Nacional de Performance Negra, or National Forum of Black Performance. It happened in 2005, 2006, 2009, and 2015. And right now in 2021, we are organizing the 5th edition of the National Forum of Black Performance. So in that forum, we have a meeting of different Teatro Negro and Dança Negra groups, and we discuss what kind of policy we should have to better have financial support or state support for the kind of activities we do. And then we have also policymakers participating in this forum so that we can make some documents and deliver those documents to them and see if those documents can be implemented in the future. In some cases, we have some cases of success in some of the demands that we presented, and they could also make better for us so that we could develop different plays and different things, not only for Cia dos Comuns. This is something that has to do with theater groups from all over Brazil. So this is Olodum, and this, in the case of Forum, it's really related to the policy making, and in this case, is more for the poetic exchange, artistic exchange. So in the case of Olodum, what we have are different groups, but they go to present their plays, they go to watch plays, they go to participate in different artistic workshops. That's the main focus of what Olodum does, which is also produced by Cia dos Comuns, and it happened 4 times until now, which is 2007, 10, 11, and 2016. And we had Akoben. Akoben was actually not an activity, it was kind of a movement that was made in a particular moment, especially in 2012, that was also to push the Ministry of Culture to better accept some of the demands we had. Because some of the demands we were presenting for Black performing arts, they were kind of being implemented, but they were favoring white producers and not Black producers, white producers who were producing Black arts. So Akoben was trying to change this, and it was a very, very important moment in Brazil as well. This is Hilton Cobra, who is the founder of Cia dos Comuns. This is Rodrigo, who was also part of Cia dos Comuns, and this is, at that time, the Ministry of Culture. So it was a movement that was so strong that we could actually sit with them and bring some of the discussions to them. And then finally, we go to some of the on-stage activities of Cia dos Comuns, which are the plays. I'm going to bring just a few characteristics here that I think that really, really important to pay attention. So one of the things about the plays of Cia dos Comuns is the development of a proper dramaturgy. And in this slide, I kind of explain a little bit what we can call by a proper dramaturgy, especially because it's not only an original dramaturgy, but it's a dramaturgy that is constructed by the group based on the personal experience of each one of us, and it carries some of the political issues that we want to discuss. It's not to say that it is this kind of play that says, well, this is right and this is wrong. No, sometimes what happens in those plays as we are building them is that I have an opinion about something that's happening in Brazil, and a few other actors have a different opinion, and then we go in a conflict about that, and we discuss a lot about that, and that becomes a scene. So we bring those discussions to the stage instead of presenting a solution or presenting what is right or wrong about something, but we bring the development of those discussions as well. And the kind of characters we bring to the stage are not the drama, psychological characters that we have in most of conventional theater, especially since the 19th century. We are actually more concerned with the development of social characters. So the character needs to be something that I bring in my body, that I bring to the stage, that will allow me to bring some of those social, political, and existential issues that need to be discussed and need to be critically analyzed by the audience. So we have here some of the influence of the engaged theater here, especially the influence of Bertolt Brecht theater. Okay, so we did in Cia dos Comuns 4 plays that were pretty important, and then I'm going to present some of these plays and I'm going to stop so that we can have some discussion. So the first play I want to talk to you is A Roda do Mundo, which was premiered in 2001. A Roda do Mundo, it's kind of really hard to translate this. We could translate this kind of as the wheel of the world, but maybe the better way to translate this could be kind of the circle of the world. The thing is that when we say a roda, I don't know how many of you guys know capoeira, which is a Brazilian martial arts that has been developed by Black people in Brazil since the time of slavery. And the main way of practicing capoeira is in the roda. It's a kind of a circle that people do, and people fight within that circle, right? So we have a circle with lots of people. Some people here are playing different instruments, and all the fight happens inside that circle. So this roda in the title of A Roda do Mundo refers to the roda de capoeira because this play was based in the movements and gestures of capoeira as a metaphor of the survival strategies employed by Black people in Brazil in order to surpass the violence that we are the target of. Okay? So this is Candaces-a, reconstrução do fogo, or the reconstruction of fire. This was in 2003. And this play specifically was to talk about Black women in Brazil. It has a very interesting genealogy of how play came to the stage. But the main thing here is that we wanted to talk a lot about tradition, right? So we were talking about the Candaces, we were talking about the Meroe Empire. So we were talking about a kind of existence that Black people had before slavery. So we really focused on that so that we could make a bridge between that time and the time of Black women in Brazil nowadays, the kind of suffering that we have and the role that they also have in those communities to keep them together, which is kind of a role, but sometimes it is really heavy also to carry this kind of function or this kind of role in those communities. But that was also some of the discussion we had. The point is that we wanted to show that this political participation of Black people, the political action is also a tradition, because sometimes when we talk about tradition, we talk about the spirituality and we talk about the different language that we can speak, and we talk about lots of the food, but then sometimes it's necessary to say that the political struggle is also part of our tradition as well. That is part of our ancestrality as well. And that's exactly what Candace does, specifically talking about Black women in Brazil. Then we also have Bakulo, Os Bem Lembrados. Bakulo premiered in 2005, all right? And it premiered, and Bakulo is also a play that talks a lot about ancestrality, but the main point in Bakulo is to talk about globalization, but from the perspective of Black communities. So if in the other plays, there are some things that we talk about, but mainly we talk about anti-Black racism, in Bakulo, in my analysis, in Bakulo, we do talk about anti-Black racism, but the main point is to talk about globalization from the perspective of Black people. And that's something that I think that Teatro Negro also is evolving a lot in this sense. It's not only to be talking about ourselves, as in the definition that is brought here, not in the definition, but in that excerpt that I brought from Leda Maria Martins here, is not only to understand how they talk about us and how we deal with that to talk about ourselves, but also how we can interpret our experience in the world in a way that we can talk about the world, not about ourselves. We can talk about the world through our own perspective, through our own lived experience. And that's pretty much the contribution of Bakulo to Black dramaturgy at that point. And finally, we have Silêncio, and I'm pretty sure that you guys had the opportunity to read one of my essays when I bring Silêncio to you. And Silêncio is the fourth play of Cia dos Comuns. It has very different characteristics if we compare to the other ones. So if we had here in a Roda do Mundo, we had lots of influences of capoeira and candomblé, for example, and here in Candaces, we had candomblé really, really deep as part of the play, as a cultural reference that we brought here. In Bakulo, we also had some of that reference, but as you can see here, we have the flute, we had the violin, we had saxophone, we had different instruments here, not only the percussive instruments that are main characteristics of candomblé and capoeira, but here in Silêncio, none of that. It's a kind of a very contemporary theater. There is no character, everything is danced, every movement is choreographed. And the main point here in Silêncio is that all that happens in those 50 minutes of the play wants to translate the kind of anxiety that many of us feel every time we go to the door and we go to the knob of the door, kind of to turn and open the door, to step outside our house, and we feel that sense that anti-Black racism is gonna plague us some part of our day. It's gonna be with us. It's kind of a different anxiety we have when we go outside. Of course, not everybody feels that, but many people feel that. So we are at home, okay, everything is fine. So we need to go outside. Okay, that's out. And when we step outside, we say, there is that very, very short moment of anxiety. So what this place does is to get this very short moment of anxiety and expand in 50 minutes of dance, voice, poetics, and all those things that happen. So these are different characteristics as well, that you can see different ways of doing theater in one of those particular groups. So this is pretty much what I wanted to show you today, and talk a little bit about Teatro Negro in Brazil, focusing on a particular Teatro Negro group, but wanting to call everybody's attention that Teatro Negro in Brazil is very diversified. We have different groups, different languages, different ways of doing Teatro Negro in Brazil, and even single groups do not do a single way, do not have a single way of doing theater. So in the case of Cia dos Comuns, for example, if you see how the first play was and the last play is, it is completely different, as it happens also in some of the plays of Bando de Teatro Olodum and many other Teatro Negro groups that we could talk here if we had kind of 6 months to be talking without stopping. Okay, so this is what I wanted to share with you today, and I'm open to your questions and comments and reactions. Thank you.